What was your "oh it my life is over, my parents are gonna kill me" moment you had as a child teen? My parents paid for my mobile phone subscription. Got a girlfriend and called a lot more. Too much more. Raked up a €600 bill. My soul left my body that day. My sister and I, in 2010, had just gotten unlimited texting for $25 a month. I was 15 and didn't pay for it. Between us we sent and received almost 30,000 texts that month, which without the plan would have charged $0.15 a text. End of month. The bill comes round and the cell company never applied the unlimited texting, so we received a $4,500 plus bill. They fixed it quickly. But I never thought I was going to die that much before. There was a small lizard trapped in our garage under a pile of wood, so I moved some of them so it could get out. I must have accidentally knocked over a larger plank in the process. That landed on my dad's car and went straight through the windshield. Lizard was fine though. Me and a few buddies got arrested for some very foolish and regrettable criminal mischief. We managed to keep it from our parents by getting to the mailbox first to destroy court notices and targeted letters from lawyers. We thought we were in the clear too. Until the newspaper article with our names in it came out. One time I snuck out of the house. And when I went to sneak back in, the door was locked. We never locked the doors to the house. So I knew I'd been caught. Lived on a farm, so I just went up to the hayloft to sleep the rest of the night. I don't think I would have been able to sleep. I always thought the anticipation of getting in trouble was worse than actually getting in trouble. I could take getting yelled at. It happened a lot and I eventually stopped listening. Waiting to get in trouble was always the hardest part. Last summer my son and his friends rode their bikes to explore an area they were told not to. It wasn't bad, but it was somewhat dangerous and technically trespassing. One of them got hurt and my son called me to come pick them up. I drove them all back to our house, and before my son walked in I said, "You know we have to talk about this, right?" He sighed and asked why I couldn't just yell at him like a normal parent, and it brought me right back to my childhood. I skipped school by leaving the house, climbing on the garage and waiting for my mum to leave. I jumped down to let myself in as she drove off and set myself up for a day on my PS1. She then came back as she'd forgotten something and I wanted to die in a hole. The yelling was something to behold. Didn't do that again. I thought it was a good idea to play with some candles while having a ReloTR marathon. Turns out that was a bad idea because I ended up getting distracted and set the family couch on fire. I frantically put it out and threw a blanket over it. I didn't leave that couch for a week. 17 years old. Had a party while the parents were out of town. I had to work the next day, but timed it so I would have plenty of time to clean before they got home that evening. Came home from work. The sprinklers are on and their car is in the driveway. Driving down my driveway, I was anxiety and fear personified. I walk in the house and my mom tells me, "Your dad had to leave before you got here, otherwise he was afraid of what he might do to you." Full stop. So we live in a 2-story colonial. My parents are away on vacation. I'm in the yard and tossing a baseball up in the air and catching it. Just a 9-year-old entertaining myself. I think to myself, "Hey, let's loft it onto the first split level roof and then it'll roll off and I'll catch it." Second toss. Crash. Shatter sister's window. Grandma was babysitting. Grandma reported. I was smoked. When I was 6. I spilled grape juice on the tan carpet in the living room. I put a pillow over it. Laid on the pillow. And vowed that I would stay there the rest of my life so my parents would never find out. I lasted about 45 minutes. My mom was more upset that I got grape juice on the pillow rather than the carpet. I was 10 years old. Only pretending to drive a car with my friend in the backseat. I knew not to touch the ignition or the gearbox. So the car is parked on an incline. I lowered the handbrake and the car starts to roll backwards, moving steadily and with increasing momentum towards a concrete wall. Thankfully I knew which one the brake was. So I pressed down on it with all my might and told my friend to get out of the car and call my dad. All the while pressing down on that brake. I thought, yep. Today I either die or my dad kills me. I live to tell the tale. Parents were away for the weekend. I took my dad's keys and took it for a small drive. I was never allowed to drive unsupervised. Didn't have a license or anything. Was a thrill. I came back. Parked. Left the keys in the same drawer he left them in. Monday arrives. I come back from school and my dad asks me to come look at the car. With a death glare. I had forgot to pull the seat back after adjusting them for my 14-year-old legs. When I was about 8, my sister, 10, and I used to play around the neighborhood with other kids. But we had to be home by 8 PM or when the street lights came on. Whichever came first. We had a watch on and every evening my mum would make sure that we had one with us and it was working. One evening we were 20 minutes late. And it was the second time that week. If we were late twice in a week we weren't allowed to go out the rest of the week. My sister and I were talking by the back garden gate making up excuses why we were late and making sure we were both on the same page in case she questioned us. We opened the gate to go inside and my mum was standing on the other side of the gate. Arms folded. That was life flashed before my eyes moment. Was looking up hentai titties when I was around 12. I'd seen my fair share of FBI has charged you with pornography, pay the court a fine and serve your sentence viruses and knew what to expect. One day I was doing my usual rounds around Pornhub but decided to go down a rabbit hole of increasingly off the wall hentai out of dumb tween curiosity. I clicked on a video and suddenly I got redirected to a white page with a picture of handcuffs to the side. I clicked on tabs and tabs that all said this account has been blocked. The text on the page itself was grammatically correct and said stuff about how child pornography, pay and bestiality are serious crimes and stuff like that. Immediately I panicked because this looked legit. Even though what I was looking at wasn't either of those. Just general weird shit. I closed the internet. Reopened Google and got the same page. I shut down the computer. Unplugged it. And started having a panic attack all through the house. I was alone. Started concocting a plan to deal with the police if they showed up at my house. Even thought of going out the way of suicide by cop when they showed up to arrest me and planned out a letter to my parents explaining that I wasn't a pervert and that I was sorry. Looked out the window every day for the police to show up. They never did. Used computer again and it was fine. Nothing happened at all. Have concluded that I got duped by a damn good virus. I browse very responsibly now. Edit, AII. Gold. Thanks. Man. Was texting my brother asking for help with something so that my mom wouldn't get mad. Called her a witch in the text. Sent it to my mom. In our single digits. My older brother locked me out of the house while parents were out. I threw a stick at the back door. And shattered the storm door glass. Knew I was gonna get a licking. But my bro got the licking instead for locking me out. He was a real jerk to me as a kid. And we are in our 50s now. But he still brings up how guilty he feels for it. That kinda makes up for how much I despised him back then. I snuck out and took the car when I was 16 before I had a license to drive at night. I hit a pothole and blew a tire. I rode around on a shredded tire for 2-3 minutes before I drove up on a guy smoking a cigarette in his driveway. He helped me change it. The next morning my parents woke up early and were going to take the car somewhere and the spare was still on. Luckily this was right when the Goodyear or Firestone tires were all blowing out and I told my parents that it happened earlier in the day before and I just didn't have a chance to tell them. Getting drunk at the age of 14 at a house party. My mum met me a few minutes walk away. She could hear my ridiculously drunk self the entire walk. Likewise. I skipped school and drank a bottle of brandy at 14 or so. I walked 20 minutes home and sobered up a touch and had the brilliant idea to announce my arrival. So as to not have my mom become suspicious. I vomited mid-sentence and she held me as I cried into the bathtub for the following few hours. I woke up the next day. At 4 AM with a stinking hangover and worried sick about the mauling I was going to get. She actually started by giving me less money and buying my alcohol for me from that point on. Not something I would call good parenting, but I stopped drinking a few months later and rarely found the interest to start again. So far going on a decade or so. Getting pulled over by 3 police cars for doing 70 in a 45. My dad happened to call as I was talking with the officers. They asked to speak with him. After a few minutes they handed the phone back and said, "You better go home. That is going to be worse than the ticket we are giving you." That was a whole lot of yelling at home. You only got a ticket for doing 70 in a 45? They didn't actually get a speed reading on me. It was only estimated. My sister locked me out of the house. She was still inside. So I went around banging on all the doors. And she's ignoring me. I started pounding on her bedroom window. And my hand accidentally goes through the window. Over 10 years later and I still have a tiny scar on my hand. Every single day my mom told me to be careful near the frozen pond next to our house. One day enough snow melted in order for my friends and I to play soccer in the field next to the pond. As you can guess, at one point the ball ended up dead center in the middle of the pond on the ice. My child brain figured if I could throw a stick on the ice, it was safe to walk on. So after making sure the ice was stable by throwing not 1 but 2 sticks, I started my walk to get the ball. It was like a scene from a movie. I reached the center and the second I picked up the ball and attempted to turn around, I fell straight through the ice and went under. I had to break the ice the entire way back to shore and had my clothes dried at a friend's house a few blocks away. By the time I got there I thought I was on my deathbed, but I could never tell my mom I was dumb enough to go out there or she would have probably killed me. I'm now 26 and have still never told my parents I did that, lol. Was driving home early in the morning after a night of playing games at a friend's. I was going too fast on an icy road. Lost control of my car and ended up 40 yards into an icy, flooded field. Car filled with water. I was 16 and had gotten my license just a couple months earlier. Parents were actually pretty cool about it. The car recovered, but always had a smell after that. For a month I kept taking the internet cord from my parents' room and running it to the living room, plugging it in the TV box. I was washing the dishes when my dad started reading out the porn titles on the bill. As a 2000s kid, stories like these always fascinate me. I had just gotten my first ever job at Ace Hardware and a week in, my buddies hit me up asking if I wanted to head to the beach for next week and I was like, yeah, of course. So I told my boss at work a family member died and I couldn't come in the next week. So my boss called my dad, who also works for the owner of the company in a different department, and starts telling him, "I'm so sorry for your loss, please let me know if I can do anything to help." And my dad was like, "What do you mean? What happened?" And he ended up telling my boss I lied about the entire thing. I still got the week off and went on the vacation, but the next few days at my job were nerve-wracking to say the least. When I came home to tell them that my girlfriend was pregnant for Thanksgiving of my freshman year of college, turkey wasn't the only thing stuffed that year. When I was 16 I was going through this emo punk phase and I decided one day that I wanted to put colored streaks in my hair. So I went to Walgreens and bought this semi-permanent red dye for dark hair, because I had no idea how to bleach my hair. I get home, apply the dye and think I'm going to look so awesome that it'll be worth it if my parents get pissed. I had no idea what I was doing, and instead of ending up with red streaks through my hair, I ended up with a huge red splotch at the top of my head because all dye clumped together or something. It looked terrible and was no longer worth getting in trouble for. The next morning I see my mom and she takes one look at my hair and bursts into laughter and tells me, "Wow, you really ducked that up, didn't you?" She wasn't mad. She thought it was hilarious, and after a bit of teasing she went to Walgreens and got me a box of black hair dye so I could cover it up and not have to go outside looking like that. Had my 15 boyfriend, 18, over while my dad wasn't home. Went to a friend's house and got drunk. My boyfriend was drunk so I put him to sleep in my bed. Went downstairs to clean up the house and fell asleep on the couch in my underwear due to no AC. Woke up to my dad standing over me and looking at an empty 26 air of vodka on the table. I told him it gets worse. I run upstairs and wake up my BF and tell him my dad is home. He jumps out of bed, runs down the stairs and out the front door. I can't believe I lived to see another day after that. I was on my period and got it very heavy for the first time and was laying back on our new couch in our new house. The couch was pretty expensive and my parents were really nervous about anyone sitting on it with food, drinks, etc. I got up to go do homework when I noticed that there were about 5 drops of blood stained into the couch. And at that moment I was done with everything. My parents were going to actually kill me. Plus I got blood onto my fav sweet pants. They were mad but knew I was innocent and they got it fixed. It's perfect now. When I was in 3rd grade I brought my brand new Beyblade to school to show to one of my friends. During PT period I carried it with me in my pocket because there was this stupid rumor about surprise bag checks when children aren't in the classroom. Guy behind me in the line saw it and told the PT teacher. The Beyblade was confiscated. I tried to act cool in front of the other kids but I was shit scared that my parents would find out. After going home I pretended to search for my Beyblade everywhere so that my mom would think that it got lost. My elder brother was in the same school and it scared me even more that someone from my class would tell him about this. Our family moved to a different place and we moved to a different school the following year. So to this day nobody knows. Now I'm 21 and this story makes me laugh every time I think about it. Edit. Beyblade not Beyblade. Sorry. Was playing with gasoline and caught my pants on fire. My parents are from Eastern Europe and my dad does not spare the rod. So there I am with first 3rd degree burns on my left leg and about a hour passed since the initial incident happened before I even thought about telling him. Adrenaline is one hell of compensatory mechanism. I was burned by rubbing alcohol and got 2nd and 3rd degree burns on both legs, my stomach and my arm. I didn't feel any pain for about 10 minutes. And then it hit me with the force of 1000 suns. Adrenaline is ducking crazy. I put my cheap gel pens in a microwave when I was 11 because they wouldn't work and my teacher told me that it's because the ink has frozen. Let's say I had to work extra that summer so I could get a new microwave. Home alone, me and my younger bro were smoking in my backyard next to my basement door. One of my buddies was on his way to meet us with more bud and to just chill. I told him to just come straight to the basement when I heard his car pull up. I think you know where this is going. In a span of about 5 seconds. 1. I get a text from him saying he hasn't left his house. 2. I look up to see my dad opening the basement door. My brother holding this wildly elaborate massive bong with negative chance of hiding it. We don't smoke by the house anymore. My mom caught me smoking pot and she called the cops and had me arrested for possession. I was only 15. I was incarcerated at 15 years old and she wonders why I don't talk to her anymore. When I was 11 I wanted s'mores and I was home alone. I went out back and made what I thought was a safe little fire surrounded by rocks. Wrong. Ultimately, the embers caught some leaves under my parents' deck on fire and I watched in abject horror as their house went up in the biggest murder-king flames I'd ever seen. They were loving and supportive after finding out I was alive but certainly less than thrilled at my idiocy. Ninja Reddit. Always have ducking homeowners insurance folks if you own a home. Especially with kids. Particularly with accident-prone ones. And no. This was the last catastrophe I caused. Shinobi Ninja Reddit. Thanks for the silver. I was also on Judge Judy a number of years later. Dad was less than pleased about that too. But that's a tale for another time. Lol. Moment. Ahahaha. The first time they went through my phone. The time when they didn't learn I was dating someone. That time my parents saw the word duck on my screen. The second time that happened. The time I read hentai, completely by accident, on my phone when they said they had a monitoring device on my phone. When my computer's hard drive broke and my dad had his friend try to recover my data. My mom told me he'd see you browser history. My parents had just left for vacation. I got pulled over doing 85 in a 45. The cop didn't write me a ticket, but gave me his phone number and told me to have my parents call him by 6 p.m. He told me if he did not get a call, he was going to issue a warrant for my arrest. Mind you, this was before cell phones were very reliable. I left a message with the receptionist at their hotel letting them know they needed to call home as soon as they checked in, and that it was an emergency. The cop told them that there was no way he could write me a ticket that didn't result in me losing my license. And being that I was just a dumb young kid being dumb, he didn't want to do that. He instructed them to put the fear of God in me, and he would put the matter behind him. Needless to say, it was not my finest moment as a son. It was a warm spring day. We were juniors, and so a bunch of us cut school to swim and drink beer at the beach. So I ran into a girl I hardly knew, and after a couple of bottles of beer, I asked her if she wanted to go home with me, since my folks were at work and my siblings were at school. So we went to my house and we had sex. So she's getting dressed in the bathroom. And who should walk in on her but my mother, who had taken a mental health day from work. Funny now, not funny at all to my pious Catholic mom. It took months for everything to calm down. When I was an adult, my father was like, "Why the hell did you have drag mom into it? Why didn't you check the house first?" But I did it. And in 1962, that was something. And it was a long time before I had sex again.